She traveled 2,000 miles to be someone's wife. He took one look at her body and rode away without speaking. In 1884 Arizona, Mara Collins stepped off that train expecting a new life. What she got was rejection so sharp it could draw blood. The man who'd written her letters for 6 months, promising partnership, promising home, turned his horse around the moment he saw her size, left her standing there with one trunk and $17 to her name. Most women would have bought a ticket back east. Mara wasn't most women. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The train's whistle cut through the desert heat like a knife through butter, and Mara Collins pressed her forehead against the window glass, watching the red rocks of Arizona territory blur past. Her collar stuck to her neck. Her corset, the good one she'd saved for this moment, dug into her ribs with every breath. She'd been traveling for 5 days straight, and the smell of coal smoke and unwashed bodies had worked its way so deep into her clothes she figured she'd never get it out. Somewhere in the car behind her, a baby was screaming. Had been screaming since Albuquerque. "Almost there," she whispered to herself. The words fogged the glass. In her reticule, folded and refolded until the creases had gone soft, were 7 letters. She'd read them so many times she could recite them by heart. "Dear Miss Collins," they all began, "I am a man of 32 years, owner of a cattle ranch outside Prescott. Thomas Hendricks, that was his name. He'd written about the land, about the sky at sunset, about needing someone steady, someone practical. He'd never once mentioned love, which Mara appreciated. Love was for fairy stories. This was business, honest business between 2 adults who understood that life was hard and loneliness was harder. She'd written back with equal honesty. I am 26 years old. I can cook, sew, manage accounts, and work from dawn until dark without complaint. I am not delicate, and I am not pretty. If those facts trouble you, we should end this correspondence now." His response had come faster than the others. Delicate women don't last out here. Pretty is a poor substitute for capable. If you're willing to come west, I'm willing to make you my wife. Simple as that. The train lurched, brakes squealing, and Mara grabbed the seat in front of her to keep from pitching forward. Outside, a wooden sign slid into view, Prescott Station. Her heart kicked against her ribs. She stood, smoothing her skirt, dark blue cotton, practical, the nicest thing she owned, and reached for her trunk in the overhead rack. A man in a suit 2 seats up glanced at her, then quickly away. She was used to that. The looking, then the not looking. She'd been a large girl, then a large woman, and people had opinions about that. Always had. The trunk was heavier than she remembered, packed with everything she owned in the world. 2 spare dresses, undergarments, her mother's Bible, a packet of letters from her sister in Philadelphia, the blue glass bottle that had belonged to her grandmother. She wrestled it down, muscles straining. No one offered to help. The train shuddered to a complete stop, and passengers began shuffling toward the exits. Mara waited, letting the crush pass. No point rushing. Thomas knew what train she'd be on. She'd written him 3 weeks ago with the exact date and time. When the car finally emptied, she carried her trunk down the narrow aisle and out onto the platform. The heat hit her like a physical thing. She'd thought Philadelphia in summer was hot, but this was different, dry, baking, the kind of heat that sucked the moisture right out of your mouth. She blinked against the glare, shading her eyes, and looked around. The platform was chaos. People greeting each other, porters hauling luggage, a dog barking somewhere, and men. Maybe a dozen of them, scattered along the platform, waiting. Some held signs. Some just stood there, scanning the faces of the women stepping off the train. Mara's hands tightened on the trunk handle. She'd sent Thomas a photograph. The only one she had, taken 2 years ago at her cousin's wedding. She'd warned him it was old. Warned him she'd put on weight since then. He'd said it didn't matter. Her eyes swept the platform again. There, a tall man in a dark hat standing near the station house. He was looking right at her. Their gazes met. Mara's breath caught. Was that? The man started walking toward her, and relief flooded through her chest. Thank God. She set down the trunk, pressed a hand to her hair, tried to smooth the worst of the travel dust from her skirt. He stopped 6 feet away. Thomas? Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. He didn't answer, just stood there looking at her. His face was weathered, sun-dark, hard to read. 40, maybe. Older than his letters had suggested. His gaze traveled down her body, not quick, not subtle, from her face to her shoulders to her waist to the hem of her skirt. Mara felt her cheeks burn. She lifted her chin. I'm Mara Collins. From Philadelphia. I know who you are. His voice was flat. Something cold settled in her stomach. The train was delayed and you're bigger than your picture. The words landed like stones. Mara opened her mouth, closed it. Heat crawled up her neck, but she forced herself to hold his stare. I told you in my letters that... Yeah, you told me. He spat into the dust beside the platform. Didn't realize you meant that big? For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The noise of the station faded to a dull roar in her ears. Thomas Hendricks looked at her one more time. A look that said disappointment, said mistake, said not what I ordered. And then he turned around and walked away. Just like that. Walked back to a horse tied near the station house, swung himself into the saddle, and rode off down the street without a backward glance. Mara stood there, frozen. Around her, the platform kept moving. People kept talking, laughing, greeting loved ones. The dog kept barking. Somewhere a vendor was shouting about fresh lemonade, and Mara Collins stood alone with her trunk and her 7 letters and the awful, crushing weight of understanding that she'd just been rejected like a bolt of fabric that didn't match the sample. Her legs felt strange, watery. She sat down hard on the trunk, her skirts pooling around her, and stared at the place where Thomas Hendricks had disappeared around the corner. Bigger than your picture, she'd warned him. She'd been honest. She'd told him exactly. A hand touched her shoulder, and she flinched. You all right, miss? Mara looked up. An older woman stood beside her, gray hair pinned back, concern creasing her face. She wore a simple calico dress and carried a basket on her arm. I'm fine. The words came out automatic. You don't look fine. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Mara repeated. She stood up, brushing at her skirt, trying to pull herself together. Just adjusting to the heat. The woman's eyes, sharp and knowing, flicked toward the street where Thomas had ridden off, then back to Mara. That was Tom Hendricks, wasn't it? Mara's throat tightened. She nodded. Mail order bride? Another nod. The woman made a soft sound, something between sympathy and disgust. Men. She shook her head. You got somewhere to go, honey? Did she? Mara's mind spun. She had $17 in her reticule. The return train to Philadelphia wouldn't leave until tomorrow morning. She'd checked the schedule. A hotel room would cost, what, $1? $2? And meals. And the ticket itself. I'll figure it out, she heard herself say. There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Chen runs it. Clean rooms, fair prices. You tell her Violet sent you. Thank you. The woman, Violet, hesitated, like she wanted to say more. Then she just patted Mara's arm and walked away, her basket swinging. And Mara was alone again. She looked down at her trunk, at the dusty platform, at the town spreading out before her in the brutal afternoon sun, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple in the distance, mountains rising up beyond like broken teeth against the sky. She'd sold everything to come here. Her mother's furniture, her grandmother's silver, the little house in Philadelphia she'd inherited when her father died. Everything. For this. Her hands curled into fists. Heat pricked behind her eyes and she blinked hard, forcing it back. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers. Not because some coward of a man couldn't see past. Miss? You need a porter? A young man, barely 20, stood nearby, cap in hand. His eyes kept sliding away from her, like looking directly at her embarrassment might be contagious. No, thank you. She picked up the trunk herself, muscles screaming in protest, and started walking. The boarding house sat at the end of a narrow street, a 2-story building with peeling paint and a hand-lettered sign that read, Rooms, Meals, Respectable Only. Mara climbed the steps, set down the trunk, and knocked. A woman answered almost immediately, small, Chinese, maybe 50, with black hair streaked with gray and eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Chen? Yes. Violet sent me. I need a room. Mrs. Chen looked her up and down, not the way Thomas Hendricks had, Not with judgment, just assessing. How long? One night, maybe two. Mara's voice wavered and she hated herself for it. I'm not sure yet. $1 a night, meals included. No men, no drinking, no noise after 9. That's fine. You have money? Mara opened her reticule and pulled out 2 silver dollars. Mrs. Chen took them, nodded, and stepped aside. Room 3, top of the stairs, supper's at 6. The room was small, just a bed, a washstand, a single window overlooking the street. But it was clean. The sheets looked fresh. And when Mara closed the door behind her and set down the trunk and finally let herself sink onto the bed, the silence wrapped around her like a blanket. She sat there for a long time, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. Then she stood up, unpacked her mother's Bible, opened it to a random page, and tried to read. The words swam. She closed it again. Bigger than your picture. Outside, the sun was beginning to sink toward the mountains. The light coming through the window turned gold, then amber, then deep orange. Mara got up and poured water from the pitcher into the basin, washed her face, her hands, the back of her neck. The water was cool and felt like a small mercy. She looked at herself in the mirror above the washstand, really looked. A round face, brown eyes, brown hair that never quite did what she wanted it to. A body that had been called too much, too big, too soft for as long as she could remember. She'd actually thought, that out here, in the middle of nowhere, where survival mattered more than beauty, maybe it would be different. Stupid. There was a knock at the door. Supper? Mrs. Chen's voice called. I'm not hungry. A pause. You should eat anyway. I'm fine. Footsteps retreated down the hall. Mara sat back down on the bed, pulled the letters from her reticule, read them again, looking for… what? Some sign she'd missed? Some clue that Thomas Hendricks was the kind of man who'd turn coward the moment reality didn't match his fantasy? I'm willing to make you my wife. She crumpled the first letter in her fist, then the second, then all of them, one by one, until they were just wads of paper scattered across the quilt. Tomorrow, she'd buy a ticket back to Philadelphia. And then what? She had no house, no job. Her sister's family didn't have room for her. They'd made that clear when she'd announced her plan to head west. You're making a mistake, they'd said. You don't know this man. But she'd gone anyway because staying meant working herself to death in some factory. Or worse, becoming the charity case who moved from relative to relative, always a burden, never quite belonging. At least here, she'd thought, she could build something, be something. Mara lay down on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. The room grew dark. She didn't sleep. When morning came, gray and cool, Mara washed her face again, braided her hair, and counted the money in her reticule. $15 left. The train ticket would take most of that. She went downstairs. Mrs. Chen was in the kitchen frying eggs. The smell made Mara's stomach clench. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Sit, Mrs. Chen said, not looking up. I need to settle my bill. You paid for 2 nights. It's only been 1. I'm leaving today. Mrs. Chen slid 2 eggs onto a plate, added a slice of bread, and set it in front of Mara. Eat first, then leave. Mara wanted to argue, but the eggs looked good, and her hands were shaking, and she was so damn tired. She sat, she ate. The eggs were perfect, crispy edges, runny yolks. The bread was fresh. Mara ate every bite, and when she was done, she felt almost human again. Thank you, she said quietly. Mrs. Chen poured her a cup of coffee. Where will you go? Back east? Why? Mara blinked. Because there's nothing for me here. There's nothing for you there either, or you wouldn't have come. The words stung because they were true. Mrs. Chen sat down across from her, hands wrapped around her own coffee cup. You came for a man. The man was a fool. That doesn't mean you have to run. I don't have anywhere else to go. Then make somewhere. Mara stared at her. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Mrs. Chen's voice was calm, matter of fact. You have hands. You have a brain. You can work. There's always work. Doing what? I don't know, but you won't find out sitting in my kitchen feeling sorry for yourself. It should have been offensive. Instead, it was like a slap that woke her up. Mara set down her coffee cup. I have $15. That's more than most people start with. I don't know anyone here. You know me. You know Violet. Mrs. Chen shrugged. That's 2. Tomorrow, maybe 3. You can't plan your whole life before you live it. Mara sat back in her chair. Outside, the street was waking up. She could hear wagons rattling past, voices calling to each other. Make somewhere. It was insane. She didn't know this town, didn't know the territory, didn't have a job or a plan But going back meant admitting defeat, meant slinking home to people who'd told her she was making a mistake, meant spending the rest of her life wondering what if. What kind of work? She asked. Mrs. Chen smiled, a small, knowing smile. Let's find out. They walked through town together, Mrs. Chen pointing out shops and introducing Mara to people whose names she immediately forgot. The general store didn't need help. Neither did the hotel. The dress shop had a girl already. What about the schoolhouse? Mara asked. Teacher's been here 15 years. She's not going anywhere. By noon, Mara's optimism was fading fast. They stopped for water at a public pump near the church, and she splashed some on her face, trying not to think about the return train leaving at 2 o'clock. There's one more place, Mrs. Chen said. Where? Doc Harding's. He's old, always needs someone to help with the cleaning, the laundry, running errands. It wasn't much, but it was something. They found Doc Harding's office on a side street, a small building with a painted sign and a waiting room that smelled like carbolic acid and old leather. The doctor himself was ancient, bald except for white tufts above his ears, and he squinted at Mara like she was a specimen under glass. You strong? He asked. Yes. Can you read? Yes. Can you follow instructions without asking 100 damn questions? Mara almost smiled. Yes. $1 a week plus room in the back. You'll clean, do laundry, help me with patients when I need an extra pair of hands. No fainting, no complaining. I don't faint. Good. You start tomorrow. And just like that, Mara Collins had a job. The room behind the doctor's office was barely bigger than a closet, just space for a narrow bed and a shelf, but it was hers. Mara moved in that afternoon, hanging her spare dresses on pegs, setting her grandmother's blue bottle on the shelf where the light from the single window would catch it. She worked the rest of the day scrubbing floors, boiling bandages, organizing bottles of medicine whose names she couldn't pronounce. Doc Harding mostly ignored her, muttering to himself as he worked. But when evening came and she'd finished everything he'd asked, he grunted approval. You'll do, he said. It wasn't praise, but it was enough. That night, lying in her new bed, Mara listened to the sounds of the town settling into darkness. Dogs barking, someone playing a fiddle badly, the distant sound of laughter from a saloon. She thought about Thomas Hendricks, about the look on his face, about the letters she'd burned that morning in Mrs. Chen's stove. And she thought about Mrs. Chen's words. Make somewhere. Maybe she would. Maybe this was the beginning of something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with a man who couldn't see past her body, and everything to do with what she could build with her own 2 hands. She didn't know yet, but she was still here, and that, for now, was enough. The days fell into a rhythm. Mara woke before dawn, washed, dressed, and began her work. She scrubbed the office until it gleamed. She boiled instruments and bandages. She learned which bottles held laudanum, which held iodine, which held the foul-smelling liniment Doc Harding swore by. Patients came and went. A man with a broken finger, a child with croup, a woman whose baby wasn't gaining weight. Mara watched, helped when asked, and kept her mouth shut. Doc Harding wasn't warm, but he was fair. He paid her on time, didn't ask personal questions, showed her how to mix plaster for casts, how to hold a patient still while he set a bone, how to keep the ledger books so he could track who owed what. You're better at this than the last 3 girls combined, he told her one afternoon. What happened to them? Got married, all of them, he snorted. Women always do. Mara didn't answer. A week passed, then 2. She saw Thomas Hendricks once, from a distance, riding down the main street. Her heart kicked in her chest, but he didn't look her way, and she turned and walked in the opposite direction before he could. She made a friend, a girl named Sarah, who worked at the general store, who had red hair and freckles and a laugh that sounded like bells. They ate lunch together sometimes, sitting on the steps behind the store, sharing bread and cheese. "You hear about the Ward Ranch?" Sarah asked one day. "No, what about it?" "Caleb Ward's been sick, real sick. Fever, they say. He's out there all alone, no wife, no family. People are wondering if he's even still alive." Mara frowned. "Why doesn't someone check on him?" Sarah shrugged. "It's a long ride, and Caleb's not exactly friendly. Keeps to himself, always has. Someone should still check." "You volunteering?" Sarah grinned. "I didn't say that," but the thought stayed with her. Awesome. That evening, as Mara was closing up the office, Doc Harding came out of the back room carrying his medical bag. "I'm riding out to the Ward place," he said. "If the man's still alive, he needs help." Mara looked up. "Want me to come?" He hesitated. "It's a rough ride. 5 miles, most of it uphill." "I can handle it." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Get your shawl. It'll be cold by the time we get back." They rode out as the sun was setting, Doc Harding on his old mare, Mara on a borrowed mule that plodded along with resigned patience. The land opened up around them, scrub brush and red rock, hills rising in the distance, the sky turning impossible shades of pink and orange. Mara had never been this far from town, never been anywhere really except Philadelphia and the train ride west. The openness of it all made her chest feel tight and loose at the same time. "How long has he been sick?" she asked. "Don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. Caleb doesn't come to town much." "What's wrong with him?" "Won't know until we get there." They rode in silence after that. The light faded. Stars began to prick through the darkening sky. The Ward Ranch appeared almost without warning. A small house, a barn, a corral. Everything looked tired. The fence was sagging. Weeds grew tall around the porch. A few scrawny cattle grazed in the distance. Doc Harding dismounted and tied his horse. Mara did the same. They climbed the porch steps, and Doc knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. "Ward, you in there?" Still nothing. Doc tried the door. It wasn't locked. It swung open with a creak, and the smell that rolled out made Mara's stomach turn. Sweat and sickness and something rotten. "Stay close," Doc muttered. They stepped inside. The house was dark, filthy. Dishes piled in the sink, clothes scattered across the floor. And in the corner, on a narrow bed, lay a man. He wasn't moving. Doc Harding crossed the room in 3 strides, set down his bag, and pressed his fingers to the man's neck. "He's alive," he said. "Barely." Mara moved closer. In the dim light, she could make out a face, gaunt, unshaven, slick with sweat. The man's breathing was shallow, ragged. His shirt was soaked through. "Infection," Doc said. He pulled back the blanket, and Mara saw the wound, a deep gash on the man's leg, red and swollen, oozing. "Probably got cut on something, didn't clean it right. It's festered." "Can you help him?" "Maybe. If we're lucky." He looked at her. "I'm going to need your hands. You squeamish?" "No." "Good." They worked through the night. Doc Harding cleaned the wound, drained the infection, stitched the worst of it. Mara held the man down when he thrashed, delirious with fever. She fetched water, tore cloth for bandages, forced medicine between his cracked lips when Doc told her to. The man, Caleb Ward, didn't wake. But he didn't die either. By the time the sun started to rise, Doc Harding sat back exhausted. "That's all I can do," he said. "Rest is up to him." Mara looked at the man on the bed. He was still pale, still sweating, but his breathing seemed steadier. "What happens now?" she asked. "We wait. If the fever breaks, he might make it." "And if it doesn't?" Doc didn't answer. They stayed through the morning. Mara cleaned the worst of the mess in the house, scrubbed the dishes, swept the floor, opened the windows to let in fresh air. Doc checked on Caleb every hour, changing bandages, monitoring his pulse. By noon, the fever hadn't broken. "I have patients back in town," Doc said. "I need to go." Mara looked at Caleb Ward, unconscious and helpless. "I'll stay," she said. Doc raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Someone has to." He nodded slowly. "I'll send someone out tomorrow to check on you both. There's a rifle over the door if you need it. Don't hesitate to use it." And then he left. And Mara was alone with a dying man in the middle of nowhere. She should have been terrified. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The first thing Mara did after Doc Harding left was check Caleb Ward's pulse again. Still there, faint but steady. His skin was hot enough to scald, and when she pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, she pulled away fast. The fever was eating him alive from the inside. She'd seen fever before, back in Philadelphia when her father got sick. She remembered the way it burned through him, the way his eyes went glassy and distant, the way he'd talked to people who weren't there. He'd died on the 4th day. Caleb Ward was on day 3, maybe 4, maybe more. She had no way of knowing. "You're not dying on me," she said aloud. Her voice sounded strange in the empty house. "Not after all that work." He didn't respond, didn't even twitch. Mara fetched water from the well outside. The bucket was crusted with dirt, and she had to scrub it clean first, and brought it back in. She tore more strips from an old sheet she'd found in a trunk, soaked them in cool water, and laid them across Caleb's forehead and chest. The fever would burn through them in minutes, but it was something. She worked methodically, changed the bandage on his leg. The wound looked angry, red spreading outward in thin lines like tree roots. Doc Harding had said if those lines reached his heart, that would be the end. She traced them with her finger, measuring. They'd grown since morning. "Come on," she whispered. "Fight it." The house was a wreck. Mara couldn't stand it. She needed to move, needed to do something with her hands, or she'd start thinking too hard about how isolated they were, how far from help, how easily this man could stop breathing, and she'd be here alone with a corpse. She started cleaning. The dishes first. Crusted with old food, some of them growing things she didn't want to examine too closely. She hauled water, heated it on the stove, scrubbed until her hands were raw. Then the floor. Then the table. She found a broom with half its bristles missing and swept out the dust and dirt and what looked like mouse droppings. When she opened the cupboards looking for food, she found mostly empty shelves, some dried beans, a tin of coffee, half a sack of flour with weevils in it. No wonder the man had gotten sick. He was half starved on top of everything else. The sun was setting when she heard him moan. Mara dropped the broom and crossed to the bed. Caleb's eyes were moving beneath his closed lids, his head turning side to side like he was trying to shake something off. "Mr. Ward?" She touched his shoulder lightly. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened. For a second they focused on her face, and she saw they were gray, or maybe blue, hard to tell in the dim light. "Who?" His voice was a rasp, barely audible. "My name's Mara. I'm helping Doc Harding. You've been sick." He blinked slowly, processing. Then his gaze drifted past her, around the room, like he was trying to figure out where he was. "You're home," she said. "At your ranch. Do you remember what happened?" "Leg." The word came out slurred. "Cut it. Few days ago. Maybe week. It got infected. Doc cleaned it out, but you've got a bad fever. You need to drink something." She slipped her hand behind his head, lifting it gently, and brought a cup of water to his lips. He drank, choked, drank again. Water spilled down his chin, and she wiped it away with the corner of her apron. "Easy, not too fast." He finished half the cup before his head fell back, exhausted. His eyes were already closing. "Stay awake if you can," Mara said. "Talk to me. What's your name?" "You said it already." "Your first name." "Caleb." "Caleb what?" "Ward." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You interrogating me?" "Trying to keep you conscious. How old are you?" 34, 35. Forget which. "Where's your family?" His eyes opened again, just a sliver. "Dead." "All of them?" "Yeah." The flatness in his voice told her not to push. She soaked another cloth, wrung it out, pressed it to his forehead. "You got anyone who checks on you?" she asked. "Friends? Neighbors?" "No." "That's stupid." He almost laughed. It came out as a weak cough. "Probably." You could have died out here and no one would have known for weeks. Thought about that. His words were slurring again, consciousness slipping. Seemed peaceful. Well, it's not happening today. Drink more. She gave him the rest of the water. He drank it like it hurt. Then his eyes slid shut and he was gone again. Not dead, just unconscious. His breathing evened out. Mara sat back, her own hands shaking. It was full dark now. She lit a lantern, found a chair, and dragged it close to the bed. Every hour through the night she woke him, or tried to, and forced more water down his throat. Sometimes he drank. Sometimes he pushed her hand away and muttered things she couldn't understand. Once he said a woman's name, Emma, and his voice cracked on it. By dawn, the fever hadn't broken. Mara's eyes burned with exhaustion. She dozed in the chair, waking at every sound, every shift in Caleb's breathing. Her neck ached. Her back ached. She stood, stretched, and went to check his leg. The red lines had spread. Her stomach dropped. She rewrapped the wound with clean bandages, her movements careful, deliberate. Then she went outside to feed the animals. There were chickens in a coop behind the house, scrawny things that clucked at her irritably when she scattered grain. A cow in the barn, her udder swollen. Mara had never milked a cow in her life, but she figured it out through trial and error and stubborn determination. The cow didn't seem impressed with her technique, but eventually the bucket was half full, and Mara's forearms hurt like hell. She found 2 horses in the corral, both looking underfed. She gave them hay and water and made a mental note to check the fences later. The work felt good, normal, like she had some control over something. When she came back inside, Caleb was awake again. "You're still here," he said. His voice was stronger, clearer. "Where else would I be?" "Don't know. Figured I dreamed you." Mara set down the milk pail and came to stand beside the bed. He looked awful, pale, hollow-eyed, his hair matted with sweat. But he was lucid. That was something. "How do you feel, she asked. "Like I got trampled by a horse." "That's probably better than you felt yesterday." He tried to sit up and immediately fell back with a groan. "What are you doing here?" "Keeping you alive." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Why wouldn't I?" "Don't know me. Don't owe me anything." Mara pulled the chair closer and sat down. "Doc Harding and I came out to check on you. You were half dead. He had to go back to town, so I stayed." "All night?" "2 nights now." He stared at her. "You stayed here, alone, with me. You weren't exactly in a position to cause trouble. People are going to talk." "Let them." Mara stood and went to the stove. "You need food, real food, not whatever you've been eating, which appears to be nothing. There's weevils and empty shelves. I know. I looked." She put coffee on to boil and started working on the beans she'd found, soaking them in water. It would take hours to cook them properly, but she had time. Caleb watched her from the bed. "What's your name again?" "Mara Collins." "You're not from here." "Philadelphia." "Long way." "Yes." "What brought you out west?" Mara focused on the beans, her hands moving automatically. "Bad decisions, mostly." "Join the club." She glanced at him. He wasn't smiling, but there was something less guarded in his expression, like the fever had burned away whatever walls he usually kept up. "You married?" he asked. "No." "Got someone waiting for you?" Her jaw tightened. "No." "So you just stayed to help a stranger?" "Someone had to." He was quiet for a long moment, then, "Thank you." Mara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She poured him coffee, weak because that's all the beans would give her, and brought it to him. He drank it sitting halfway up, wincing with every movement. "Your leg's getting worse," she said. "I know." "The infection's spreading. I know that too." "You need a real doctor. Doc Harding should come back today, but if he doesn't..." "I'm not going anywhere." Caleb set down the cup. "Can't ride like this. Can barely stand. If it gets me, it gets me." "That's a terrible attitude." "It's a realistic one." Mara crossed her arms. "You know what I think? I think you're used to being alone. You're used to nobody caring if you live or die. And part of you likes it that way because it's easier than letting anyone close enough to matter." He stared at her. You got all that from 2 days? Am I wrong? He looked away. No. The coffee boiled over and Mara swore, grabbing a rag to move the pot. When she turned back, Caleb's eyes were closed again, his breathing deep. Asleep or unconscious, she couldn't tell. She checked his pulse. Still there. The day dragged on. Mara cooked the beans, fed the animals again, tried to make sense of the mess in the barn. Tools everywhere, half broken. Tack that needed mending. She found a ledger in the house, flipped through it. Caleb Ward owed money to the feed store, the blacksmith, the bank. The last entry was 3 months old. No wonder the place looked like it was dying. She was cleaning out the chicken coop when she heard a wagon. Her heart jumped. Doc Harding. Finally. She dropped the rake and hurried around the house. But the wagon that pulled up wasn't the doctor's. It was bigger, driven by a heavy-set man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard. A woman sat beside him, younger, wearing a blue dress and a bonnet. They both stared at Mara. "Help you?" Mara said. The man climbed down slowly. "Name's Porter. I own the ranch 2 miles south. Heard Caleb was sick." "He is. Doc Harding's been treating him." Porter's eyes swept over her, the same way people always looked at her, taking in her size, her presence, forming opinions. "And you are?" "Mara Collins. I work for Doc Harding." "You been staying here?" Someone had to. Caleb couldn't take care of himself. The woman in the wagon, Porter's wife, Mara assumed, leaned forward. "Alone? Just the two of you?" "Yes." "That's not proper." Mara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "Proper wasn't the priority. Keeping him alive was." Porter scratched his beard. "How's he doing?" "Not good. The fever hasn't broken. The infection's spreading. We brought some food, Mrs." Porter gestured to a basket in the back of the wagon. "And I can sit with him if you need to get back to town." It was a kind offer, a sensible offer. Mara didn't trust it. "I'll stay," she said. Mrs. Porter's mouth thinned. "It's not appropriate for an unmarried woman to—" "I'm aware of what people think is appropriate. But unless you're planning to stay the night, I'm the best option he's got." Porter exchanged a glance with his wife. Then he shrugged. "Suit yourself. We'll check back in a few days." They left the basket on the porch, bread, preserves, some dried meat, and drove off without another word. Mara watched them go, her hands clenched into fists. Proper. She was so damn tired of that word. When she went back inside, Caleb was awake. "Who was that?" he asked. "Your neighbor, Porter." "He say anything?" "Not much." Mara unpacked the basket, setting the food on the table. "His wife thinks I'm ruining your reputation by being here." Caleb snorted. "I don't have a reputation to ruin." "Well, apparently I do." He studied her face. "You care what people think?" "I care that they don't know a damn thing about me and think they can judge anyway." She set down the jar of preserves harder than necessary. "Sorry, it's been a long 2 days. You should go back to town. I'm not leaving you here to die." "I'm serious. Porter's right. People will talk. You don't need that kind of trouble." Mara turned to face him. "You know what trouble is? Trouble is watching someone suffer when you could help. Trouble is walking away because you're worried about what strangers think. I came out here to build a new life, and I'll be damned if I'm going to do it by being a coward." Caleb blinked. Then slowly, he smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less worn down. "You're stubborn." "Yes." "I like that." "Good. Now shut up and let me check your leg." She changed the bandage again. The infection hadn't gotten worse, but it hadn't gotten better either. The red lines held steady, creeping toward his knee. Mara worked in silence, her jaw tight. When she finished, Caleb caught her wrist. His grip was weak but deliberate. "Mara." She looked at him. "Thank you," he said again. "I mean it. You didn't have to do any of this." "I know." "Why did you?" She thought about Thomas Hendricks, about the letters, about standing on that train platform, humiliated and alone, about choosing to stay instead of run. "Because someone should have done it for me," she said quietly. She pulled her hand free and went to stir the beans. That night, the fever spiked again. Caleb thrashed in the bed. mumbling, his skin so hot Mara thought he might combust. She pressed cold cloths to his face, his chest, his arms. She forced water between his lips. She talked to him, saying anything that came to mind. Stories from Philadelphia, descriptions of the town, the weather, the stubborn cow in the barn. "You have to fight," she told him at one point, when his breathing turned shallow and ragged. "I didn't come all this way to watch you give up." Near midnight, he opened his eyes, looked right at her. "Emma," he said. His voice was thick with grief. "I'm sorry. I couldn't—" "I'm not Emma," Mara said gently. "I'm Mara. You're at your ranch. You're sick, but you're going to be okay. She's gone. I know. I couldn't save her. That's not your fault." His eyes filled with tears. "Should have been me." Mara's throat tightened. She took his hand, rough, calloused, burning hot, and held it. "You're still here," she said. "That means something." He didn't answer, just closed his eyes and let the tears slip down his face. She stayed beside him, holding his hand, until he fell asleep again. By dawn, something had shifted. Mara felt it before she checked. His breathing was deeper, more regular. When she pressed her hand to his forehead, the heat had lessened. Not gone, but less. She checked his pulse, stronger. She unwrapped the bandage on his leg, hardly daring to hope. The red lines had stopped spreading. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. She sat back on her heels, her whole body shaking with relief. He was going to make it. She went outside and stood on the porch, breathing in the cool morning air. The sky was turning pink at the edges. Birds were starting to sing. The world looked new, washed clean. Mara let herself cry then, just for a minute. All the fear and exhaustion and worry pouring out. Then she wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and went to feed the animals. When she came back inside, Caleb was awake and sitting up. "You look better," she said. "Feel like hell, but yeah, better." He looked around the house, really looked, for the first time. "You cleaned." "Couldn't help myself. It was driving me crazy." "You didn't have to." "I know. I wanted to." She poured him coffee, brought it to him. "Your fever broke. The infection's stabilizing. Doc Harding should be here soon, but I think you're past the worst of it." He took the coffee, his hands still shaky. "How long was I out?" 3 days, give or take." "And you stayed the whole time?" "Yes." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just get better." She made him eat bread and preserves from the porter's basket, and he managed half of it before exhaustion pulled him back down. But it was normal exhaustion now, not the feverish delirium, his body healing itself. Mara spent the rest of the morning working. She mended a hole in the roof where rain was getting in. She fixed the latch on the chicken coop. She hauled water and chopped wood and did 100 small tasks that needed doing. It felt good to be useful, to see the results of her work, to build something instead of running from something. Doc Harding arrived just after noon, riding his old mare at a leisurely pace. He took one look at Caleb and grunted approval. "Fever broke?" "This morning," Mara said. "Good. Knew you'd be fine." He examined the leg, prodded the wound, made Caleb wince. "Infection's clearing. Keep it clean. Change the bandage twice a day. You'll be back on your feet in a week or so." "Thanks, Doc," Caleb said. "Don't thank me. Thank her. She did all the work." He looked at Mara. "You ready to head back?" Mara glanced at Caleb, at the house, at everything she'd done in the past 3 days. "Actually," she said slowly, "I was thinking I might stay a bit longer, just to make sure he doesn't do something stupid and tear those stitches." Doc Harding raised an eyebrow. "That right?" "If it's all the same to you. I know I'm supposed to be working at the office, but I can manage a few more days on my own. Lord knows I did it before you showed up." He stood, gathering his bag. "Just don't make a habit of it. And Ward, you pay her. She's earned it." "I will," Caleb said. After Doc left, the house felt very quiet. Caleb was watching her from the bed. "You really want to stay? For a few more days? If that's all right." "Why?" Mara looked around the house, at the clean floors, the organized shelves, the mended roof, at the evidence of her own hands making something better. Because there's more work to do, she said. And I'm good at work. He smiled. Yeah, I noticed. Over the next few days, Mara fell into a routine. She woke early, fed the animals, made breakfast. She helped Caleb to his feet when he needed to move around. He was stubborn about it, hated needing help, but his leg couldn't support his weight yet. She changed his bandages, made him eat, bullied him into resting when he pushed too hard. And she worked on the ranch. She mended fences. She cleaned out the barn. She organized the tools, inventoried the supplies, figured out what needed buying. She found an old vegetable garden behind the house, overgrown with weeds, and spent an afternoon clearing it out. You planning to plant something? Caleb asked one evening. He was sitting on the porch, his bad leg propped up, watching her work. Maybe, if I stay long enough. You thinking about it? Mara stabbed the shovel into the dirt. I don't know, I have a job in town. A room. It's stable. But I like this, the work, the space, feeling like I'm building something. You're good at it. I know. She pulled up another weed, tossed it aside. My father had a small farm outside Philadelphia. Nothing fancy, but he taught me how to work the land, how to fix things. I was the only child, so I learned to do everything. People used to say it wasn't ladylike. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess they were right. They were idiots. Mara looked at him, surprised. Caleb met her eyes. Anyone who can't see how valuable that is doesn't deserve your time. Something warm unfurled in her chest. She looked away quickly, back to the garden. Thanks, she said quietly. They ate dinner together that night. Beans and the last of the porter's bread. Caleb was getting stronger, able to sit at the table now instead of being stuck in bed. They talked about small things. The ranch, the weather, the chickens, who Mara had started naming despite herself. You called the brown one Eunice, Caleb said, grinning. She looks like a Eunice. She's a chicken. A chicken can have a name. He laughed, a real laugh, the first she'd heard from him, and it lit up his whole face. Mara found herself smiling back. Later, after Caleb had gone to bed, she'd insisted he take the bed while she slept on a bedroll by the fire. Mara sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. She'd been in Arizona for almost a month now. A month since Thomas Hendricks had looked at her and ridden away. A month since she'd stood on that platform feeling like the world had ended. It hadn't ended. It had just changed direction. She thought about Mrs. Chen's words. Make somewhere. Maybe this was somewhere. Maybe it could be. She didn't know yet. But for the first time since she'd stepped off that train, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The whispers started on a Sunday. Mara had been at the ranch for nearly 2 weeks when she rode into town with Caleb's supply list. He was walking again now, though he still favored his good leg, and he'd insisted she take his horse instead of the mule. The animal was a gray mare with a white blaze, gentle-tempered and easy to handle. Her name's Ash, Caleb had said that morning, helping Mara into the saddle. His hands had lingered on her waist a second longer than necessary, steadying her. She'll get you there and back without any fuss. I've ridden before, you know. I know, just making sure. He'd stepped back, shading his eyes against the morning sun. Pick up flour, coffee, and nails if Porter's got them. And see if Doc needs you back yet. You trying to get rid of me? Trying to make sure you still have a job when this is over. She'd ridden out before he could see her smile. The town looked the same as it had 2 weeks ago. Dusty Main Street, false front buildings, people going about their business. Mara tied Ash outside the general store and went inside. Sarah was behind the counter, arranging bolts of fabric. When she saw Mara, her face lit up. There you are. I thought you disappeared off the face of the earth. Been busy. So I heard. Sarah's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Is it true you've been staying at Caleb Ward's place? Mara's stomach tightened. He was sick. Someone had to help him. For 2 weeks? He nearly died, Sarah. The infection was bad. I'm not judging. Sarah held up her hands. But people are talking. You know how it is. What are they saying? Sarah hesitated, then sighed. That you're living out there with him, alone. That it's not proper. There was that word again. He couldn't take care of himself, Mara said flatly. What was I supposed to do? Let him die so people wouldn't gossip? Of course not. I'm just telling you what I've heard. Sarah leaned across the counter. Mrs. Porter came in yesterday. She told half the town that you were playing house with him, said it was shameful. Heat flooded Mara's cheeks. I saved his life. I know that, but you know how people are. They see a woman and a man under the same roof, and they can assume whatever they want. I know the truth. Sarah looked at her for a long moment. You care about him. It wasn't a question. Mara picked up a sack of flour from the shelf, avoiding Sarah's eyes. I care about doing what's right. That's not what I asked. It's the only answer you're getting. Mara set the flour on the counter, along with coffee and a tin of lard. Can you add this to Caleb Ward's account? Sarah rang it up, writing the numbers in the ledger. Doc Harding came by looking for you yesterday. What'd he say? That you're welcome back any time, but he's managing fine on his own. Sarah handed her the receipt. Mara, be careful. I know you think people's opinions don't matter, but they do, especially for women who don't fit what people expect. The words stung because they were true. I'll keep that in mind, Mara said. She gathered her supplies and walked out. On the street, she nearly collided with Mrs. Porter. The older woman took one look at Mara and drew herself up like a hen fluffing its feathers. Miss Collins. Mrs. Porter. I'm surprised to see you in town. I thought you'd taken up permanent residence at the Ward Ranch. Mara forced herself to stay calm. I've been helping Mr. Ward recover from his illness, as any decent person would. Decent people don't compromise their reputations. Mrs. Porter's eyes were hard. Or the reputations of others. I haven't compromised anything. Haven't you? A young woman, unmarried, living alone with a man. People are talking, Miss Collins. They're saying terrible things. Then maybe they should find something better to do with their time. Mrs. Porter's face went red. You're being deliberately obtuse. Don't you understand what this means? Caleb Ward has to live in this town. He has to do business here. And now, because of you, people are questioning his character. The words hit harder than Mara expected. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mrs. Porter pressed on. He's a good man. He's had a hard life. He doesn't deserve to have his name dragged through the mud because some Eastern girl doesn't understand how things work out here. I understand perfectly, Mara said, but her voice wavered. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're destroying what little standing he has left in this community. The decent thing, the kind thing, would be to leave, go back to town. Let him rebuild his reputation. Mrs. Porter swept past, leaving Mara standing in the middle of the street. Around her, people were staring. A woman across the way whispered something to her companion. Two men outside the saloon stopped talking to watch. Mara loaded the supplies onto Ash with shaking hands and rode out of town. She made it halfway back to the ranch before she had to stop. She dismounted, led Ash off the road, and sat down hard on a rock. Mrs. Porter was right. The realization sat in her stomach like a stone. She'd been so focused on helping Caleb, on doing the work, on proving she could be useful, she hadn't thought about what it might cost him. She'd come to Arizona to build a new life. Instead, she was tearing down someone else's. The smart thing, the kind thing, would be to leave. Go back to Doc Harding's. Let Caleb recover in peace. Let the town forget she'd ever been there. But the thought of leaving, of walking away from the ranch, from the work she'd done, from Caleb, made her chest ache. When had that happened? When had she started to care? She sat there for a long time, watching the shadows lengthen across the desert. Then she climbed back on Ash and finished the ride home. Caleb was in the barn when she arrived, mucking out stalls. He shouldn't have been. His leg wasn't strong enough yet, but he was stubborn as hell and hated sitting still. You're going to tear those stitches, Mara said. He looked up, pitchfork in hand, and grinned. You sound like Doc Harding. Because he's right. She dismounted, started unloading the supplies. You get the flour you needed? Yeah, and coffee. She paused. And some gossip. His smile faded. What kind? The kind where people think we're doing something we're not. Caleb set down the pitchfork. What did they say? That I'm ruining your reputation, that people are talking, that I should leave so you can salvage what's left of your standing in town. He was quiet for a moment, then, do you want to leave? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. He crossed the barn, favoring his bad leg. Mara, people have been talking about me since Emma died. They'll keep talking whether you're here or not. That's what small towns do. Who was Emma? The question came out before she could stop it. Caleb's face changed, something shuddered and painful crossing it. My wife. She died 3 years ago. Fever took her in 2 days. I'm sorry. So am I. He looked down at his hands. After she died, people talked, said I should have done more, should have gotten her to a doctor faster, should have saved her somehow. I stopped going to town except when I had to, stopped caring what anyone thought. But you still have to live here, do business here. Yeah, and I've managed just fine. Have you? Mara gestured around the barn. Your ranch is falling apart, Caleb. You're in debt. You were half dead when we found you. That's not fine. So you stayed to fix it. I stayed because... She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Because why? She didn't know how to answer. Because she'd had nowhere else to go. Because the work had felt good. Because for the first time since arriving in Arizona, she'd felt like she mattered. Because somewhere in the past 2 weeks, between the fever and the fear and the quiet evenings on the porch, she'd started to feel something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Because you needed help, she said finally. And now I don't? Now you're strong enough to manage on your own. Caleb stepped closer. What if I don't want to manage on my own? Mara's heart was pounding. Caleb, stay. His voice was rough. Not because I need the help, because I want you here. People will talk. Let them. It'll hurt your business, your reputation. I don't care. You should care. Her voice rose. You have to live in this town after I'm gone. You can't afford to... Gone? He caught her arm. Where are you going? Back to town. Back to Doc Harding's. That's where I belong. Says who? Says everyone. Mrs. Porter, Sarah, half the damn town. I don't care what they say. He was close now, close enough that she could see the gray blue of his eyes, the scar on his chin, the way his jaw tightened. I care what you say. Do you want to leave? It doesn't matter what I want. It's the only thing that matters. She pulled her arm free, stepping back. Her whole body was shaking. This isn't fair. What isn't? You asking me to stay when you know what it'll cost you. Then let me decide what I'm willing to pay. And what about me? The words burst out. What about what I'm willing to pay? I came here for a fresh start, Caleb, not to be the woman everyone whispers about. Not to be the reason a good man loses everything he has left. You think I have anything left to lose? Yes. You have your land, your name, my what? My empty house? My dying ranch? The town full of people who cross the street when they see me coming? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know what I had before you showed up? Nothing. I had nothing. That's not true. It is true. I was going through the motions. Waiting to die, basically. And then you walked in here and cleaned my house and saved my life and made me remember what it feels like to want something. Mara's throat was tight. Caleb, I'm not asking you to sacrifice anything. I'm asking you to stay because being here makes you happy. Because I've seen you working in that garden, fixing those fences, and you're smiling, really smiling. When's the last time you did that back in town? She couldn't answer, couldn't speak. If you want to go, go, he said quietly. But don't leave because you think you're protecting me. I don't need protecting. I need... He stopped, jaw working. What? You. I need you. The words hung in the air between them. Mara turned away, pressing her hands to her face. Her whole world was tilting sideways. Everything she'd been so sure about, leaving, protecting him, doing the right thing, suddenly felt uncertain. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Then don't decide tonight. Just stay one more day. See how you feel in the morning. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. That night she barely slept. She lay on her bedroll by the fire, watching the shadows dance across the ceiling, and thought about Philadelphia, about the house she'd sold, the life she'd left behind. The letters from Thomas Hendricks that had promised something better. She'd crossed a continent for a promise that turned to ash the moment she arrived. But somewhere in the wreckage, she'd found something real. In the morning, she made her decision. She found Caleb on the porch, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise. "I'm staying," she said. He looked at her. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." A smile broke across his face, slow and genuine and so full of relief it made her chest hurt. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet. We're going to have to face the town eventually. We'll do it together." She sat down beside him, taking the coffee cup he offered. They sat in silence, watching the light spill across the desert, turning everything gold. For a moment it felt like the world was just the two of them, but the world had other ideas. Porter showed up 3 days later with 2 other men Mara didn't recognize. They rode up to the house mid-morning, their faces set and serious. Caleb met them on the porch. Mara stayed inside, watching through the window. "Ward," Porter said, dismounting. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the situation you've got here." Caleb's jaw tightened. "What situation is that? Don't play dumb. You know what people are saying. You've got an unmarried woman living under your roof. It's causing talk. Let them talk. It's not that simple." One of the other men spoke up, tall, thin, with a pinched face. "You're making the whole town look bad. People are saying we allow this kind of behavior." "What behavior?" "She's helping me run the ranch." "Is that all she's doing?" The insinuation hung in the air like smoke. Caleb took a step forward, his hands curling into fists. "Careful, Thompson." Porter held up a hand. "Nobody's accusing you of anything, but appearances matter, and right now, it looks bad. So what do you want me to do?" "Send her back to town. Or marry her. One or the other." Inside, Mara's breath caught. "That's none of your business," Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. "It is our business when it affects the whole community," Thompson said. "We have daughters, Ward, wives. We can't have them exposed to what? A woman who works hard? A woman who saved my life?" "To scandal." Porter's voice was firm. "I'm sorry, Caleb. I know she helped you, but this has to end. Make it right, or we'll have no choice but to take action." "What kind of action?" "The kind where the bank hears about your situation. The kind where your credit gets called in. You're already behind on payments. You can't afford to make enemies right now." It was a threat, clear and simple. Caleb stared at them. "You'd ruin me over this?" "We're trying to help you. Do the right thing, and this all goes away." They rode off, leaving Caleb standing alone on the porch. Mara walked outside. "I heard." He didn't turn around. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For dragging you into this mess." "You didn't drag me. I chose to stay. And now they're threatening to destroy everything because of it." He turned to face her, and she saw the frustration burning in his eyes. "I won't let them push you out. I won't. But you can't afford to fight them either." "I don't care." "Caleb," she took his hand. "You have to care. This is your home, your life. I can't let you lose everything because of me." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe they're right. Maybe I should go back to town." "No. Just for a while. Until things calm down. Things won't calm down. They'll just find something else to talk about." His grip on her hand tightened. "I meant what I said. I need you here. And I need you to have a future." They stood there, the morning sun beating down, the weight of impossible choices pressing on both of them. "There's another option," Caleb said quietly. "What?" "We could get married." Mara's heart stopped. "What?" "Not for real, just on paper, to make them shut up." "That's insane." "Is it? We're already living together, already working together. We'd just be making it official. Marriage isn't something you do just to stop gossip." "Why not? People get married for worse reasons. Money, land, because they're lonely." "Are you lonely?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "I was, before you." Something broke open in her chest. "Caleb, I can't. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it." But even as he said it, Mara could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, the fear that she'd say no, that she'd leave anyway. And maybe she should. Maybe the smart thing was to pack her bag and ride back to town and let Caleb rebuild his life without her. But when she thought about leaving, about never seeing his smile again, never working beside him in the garden, never sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Her whole body rebelled against it. She'd come west looking for a new life. Maybe this was it, messy and complicated and nothing like what she'd imagined, but real. "I need time," she said. "Take all the time you need." She went inside, her mind spinning. The next Sunday, the whole situation came to a head. Mara had been avoiding town, sending Caleb in for supplies instead. But supplies weren't the issue anymore. People were. She was in the garden, pulling weeds, when she heard horses. Multiple horses. She stood, shading her eyes. 6 riders this time, Porter leading them. Behind him were Thompson, 2 men from the church, and, her stomach dropped, Mrs. Porter and another woman she didn't recognize. Caleb came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. "What's this about?" "We've come to settle this," Porter said, "once and for all." The group dismounted, forming a semicircle around the porch. Mara walked over to stand beside Caleb. "You had your chance to do the right thing," Thompson said. "You didn't take it, so we're here to make sure you understand the consequences." "What consequences?" "Your credit's been called in. The bank wants payment on your outstanding debts by the end of the month." Porter's voice was almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, Caleb, but you brought this on yourself." Caleb went very still. "You went to the bank?" "We had to. You left us no choice." "I can't pay that by the end of the month. You know I can't." "Then you'll lose the ranch." The words hit like a physical blow. Mara saw Caleb's face go pale, saw his hands clench at his sides. "This is my home," he said, his voice shaking. "My wife is buried on this land. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to live in sin." Mara stepped forward. "We're not living in sin. I'm helping him run the ranch. That's all." Mrs. Porter's laugh was cold. "Is that what you call it?" "It's the truth. The truth is you're a disgrace, both of you." The woman beside Mrs. Porter spoke up, her voice sharp with contempt. "We won't have our town turned into a den of immorality because you two can't control yourselves." "We haven't done anything wrong," Mara said, her voice rising. "Haven't you? You've been living here for weeks, sleeping under the same roof. What else are people supposed to think? They're supposed to think I was helping a sick man recover, that I was being a decent human being. Decent women don't put themselves in compromising positions." The words hit all Mara's old wounds. Every insult, every judgment, every time someone had looked at her body and decided they knew who she was. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her voice shaking. "We know enough." Mrs. Porter's eyes were hard. "We know you came here as a mail-order bride and were rejected. We know you've been throwing yourself at the first man who'd have you. That's not... We know you're desperate, and desperate women do desperate things." Mara felt like she'd been slapped. Caleb moved in front of her, his body tense with rage. "That's enough." "Is it?" Thompson stepped forward. "Because from where we're standing, you're choosing this woman over your own future, over everything your wife built with you. Don't you dare bring Emma into this. She'd be ashamed of you." The words seemed to drain all the fight out of Caleb. His shoulders sagged, and Mara knew in that moment that she'd lost. Not because they were right, but because the cost of fighting them was too high. "I'll leave," she heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. "Mara," Caleb started. "I'll leave," she repeated louder. "Today, right now. I'll pack my things and go back to town." Relief flooded several faces. Mrs. Porter actually smiled. "That's very sensible, Miss Collins," Porter said. "But I need you to do something first." Mara's voice was steady now, cold. "I need you to look at this ranch. Really look at it." She gestured around, at the mended fences, the cleaned barn, the garden she'd planted, the house with its fixed roof. "When I got here, this place was dying. Caleb was dying. And not one of you came to help. Not one. You call yourselves his neighbors, his community, but you left him here alone to suffer." "We didn't know," Mrs. Porter began. "You didn't care. That's the truth. You didn't care until you had something to gossip about." Mara's hands were shaking, but she kept going. "I saved his life. I worked myself to exhaustion making this place livable again. And your response is to threaten him, to take away everything he has left?" You should have left when it was appropriate. When was that? When he was burning with fever, when he couldn't stand, when he had no food and no one to help him. She looked at each of them in turn. I'll leave. I'll give you what you want. But you don't get to pretend you're righteous. You're not protecting this town. You're destroying a good man because you're more interested in appearances than actual decency. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Mara turned and walked into the house. She packed her things mechanically, her 2 dresses, her undergarments, her grandmother's blue bottle. Everything fit back into the trunk she'd brought from Philadelphia, the trunk that had carried all her hopes and dreams and ended up here, in the middle of the Arizona desert, witness to her second rejection. When she came back outside, the group had dispersed. Only Porter remained, talking quietly with Caleb on the porch. "Understand," Porter was saying, "it's nothing personal." "Get off my land," Caleb said. Porter left without another word. Caleb helped Mara load the trunk onto the wagon he'd hitched up. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? When everything was ready, Mara climbed up onto the seat. Caleb stood beside the wagon, one hand on the sideboard. "I'm sorry," he said. "Me too. If there was another way, there isn't." He looked like he wanted to say more, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, he just stepped back. Mara picked up the reins. The horse started forward. She didn't look back, couldn't let herself. But halfway down the road, she heard hoofbeats behind her. She turned. Caleb was riding after her, pushing his horse hard despite his still healing leg. "Stop!" he called. "Mara, stop!" She pulled up the wagon. He rode up beside her, breathing hard. "I can't let you go like this. Caleb, I know what I said. I know what they want. But I don't care anymore." He dismounted, came to stand beside the wagon. "I've spent 3 years caring what people think, trying to make them happy, trying to be what they expect. And it's gotten me nothing but loneliness and debt and a slow death. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying to hell with them." His eyes were bright, fierce. "I'm saying I'd rather lose the ranch than lose you." "You don't mean that." "I do. I absolutely do." He took her hand. "Marry me. For real this time. Not because of them. Because I want to wake up every morning and see you in my kitchen. Because I want to work beside you and argue with you and watch you terrorize the chickens. Because somewhere between the fever and the fighting, I fell in love with you." Mara couldn't breathe. "You don't even know me. I know you stayed when everyone else left. I know you're strong and stubborn, and you don't take anyone's shit. I know you make me want to be better." His grip on her hand tightened. "I know I don't deserve you, but I'm asking anyway. Marry me." Tears were streaming down her face now. "They'll still talk." "Let them. They'll still try to ruin you. Then we'll fight them together." "I'm not what you wanted. You're exactly what I wanted. I just didn't know it until you showed up." Mara looked at him, really looked at him. At this man who'd been a stranger 3 weeks ago and now felt like the only solid thing in her world. She thought about Thomas Hendricks, about the way he'd looked at her and ridden away. And she thought about Caleb, who'd looked at her and seen something worth fighting for. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes? Yes." Louder now. "I'll marry you." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her down from the wagon, right there in the middle of the road, and kissed her. It was clumsy and desperate and perfect. When they pulled apart, both of them were laughing. "We're going to regret this," Mara said. "Probably. They're going to make our lives hell. Almost certainly. And you're still in debt." "Yep. And your ranch is still falling apart." "I'm aware." She shook her head, but she was still smiling. "You're insane." "Absolutely." He kissed her again. "Come on. We have a wedding to plan, and a town to face." They rode back to the ranch together, leaving the wagon where it stood. Tomorrow they'd deal with the consequences, with Porter and Thompson and Mrs. Porter and everyone else who thought they had a right to judge. But tonight, they'd sit on the porch and watch the stars come out and plan the rest of their impossible, improbable life together. And for the first time since stepping off that train, Mara felt like she was exactly where she belonged. They were married 3 days later by a traveling judge, who happened to be passing through Prescott on his circuit. The ceremony took place in Doc Harding's office, the only neutral ground Mara could think of where they wouldn't be refused entry. Doc stood as witness, along with Mrs. Chen and Sarah, who'd both shown up despite the risk to their own reputations. "You're sure about this?" Sarah had whispered before the judge arrived, squeezing Mara's hand. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." The ceremony itself lasted maybe 5 minutes. The judge, a grizzled man in his 60s who'd seen enough of life not to ask too many questions, read from a worn book, asked them both if they agreed to the terms, and pronounced them married when they said yes. Caleb kissed her quick and nervous, his hands shaking slightly when he slipped the ring on her finger. It was a simple gold band, too big, that had belonged to his mother. Mara didn't care. She twisted it around her finger, feeling the unfamiliar weight. "Well," Doc Harding said when it was done. "That's that." Mrs. Chen embraced Mara, her small frame surprisingly strong. "You're braver than you know," she said quietly. "Or stupider." "Sometimes they're the same thing." Sarah cried a little, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "I'll miss seeing you in town. I'll still come visit when I can." "If they let you." The words hung heavy in the air. They all knew what was coming. The town wouldn't accept this quietly. Marriage or not, Mara and Caleb had defied the unspoken rules, and there would be consequences. Caleb helped Mara into the wagon. She'd retrieved it from where they'd abandoned it on the road, and they rode back to the ranch in silence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It should have felt romantic. Instead, it felt ominous. "You okay?" Caleb asked finally. "Ask me tomorrow." "Fair enough." That night they sat on the porch like they had so many evenings before, but everything was different now. Mara was wearing a ring. They were husband and wife. The space between them felt charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," Mara said quietly. "About what?" "All of it. Being married, being your wife. I don't know how this works." Caleb took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Neither do I. We'll figure it out." "What if we can't?" "Then we'll fail together." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's better than failing alone." They went to bed separately that night. Caleb in his room, Mara in the small space off the kitchen that had become hers. It felt strange, anticlimactic somehow. But neither of them pushed. They were married on paper, but everything else would have to wait. Mara lay awake for hours, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the distant cry of a coyote, the wind rattling the shutters. She touched the ring on her finger again and again, trying to make it feel real. She was married, to a man she'd known for less than a month, in a town that hated her. What had she done? The answer came to her in the darkness. She'd chosen to fight. For the first time in her life, she'd stopped running from judgment and chosen to stand her ground. Tomorrow would tell her if that choice had been brave or foolish. The town made its position clear on Sunday. Caleb and Mara rode in together for supplies, both of them tense. They debated whether to go at all, but they needed flour and coffee and a dozen other things. They couldn't hide forever. The moment they stepped into the general store, conversation stopped. Every person in the building turned to stare. The silence was so complete, Mara could hear her own heartbeat. Sarah was behind the counter, her face carefully neutral. "Morning." "Morning," Mara said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "We need some supplies." "Of course." Sarah pulled out the ledger. "What can I get you?" Mara rattled off the list while Caleb stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. A statement. A claim. We're together and we're not apologizing. Behind them, whispers started up again. Mara caught fragments. Actually married her. Desperate, both of them. What did they expect? She forced herself to keep her eyes forward, her spine straight. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Sarah gathered the supplies efficiently, avoiding eye contact with everyone except Mara. When she tallied the bill, she hesitated. "Your credit's been suspended," she said quietly. Caleb's jaw tightened. "What?" "Mr. Porter came in yesterday. Said all outstanding accounts are being called in. You'll need to pay cash. How much do I owe? Sarah checked the ledger. $47. Mara felt Caleb stiffen beside her. She knew, they both knew, that he didn't have $47. Not cash. Not right now. I can pay it, Mara said. Mara, I have money. From working for Doc Harding. She pulled out her small purse, counted out the bills. It was almost everything she had, but she didn't hesitate. Sarah took the money, made the entry in the ledger. That settles your account. These new supplies will be cash on delivery. Understood. They loaded the wagon in silence. As they worked, Mara was aware of people watching from doorways, from across the street. No one approached them. No one spoke to them directly. But the weight of their disapproval pressed down like a physical thing. They were climbing back onto the wagon when Porter emerged from the feed store across the street. Ward, he called. A word. Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. For a moment, Mara thought he'd drive off without answering. Then he handed her the reins and climbed down. What do you want? Porter crossed the street, his expression grave. I wanted to tell you in person. The bank's calling in your loan. You have 30 days to settle your debts, or they'll foreclose on the ranch. The words landed like a punch. You know I can't pay that in 30 days, Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. Then you shouldn't have put yourself in this position. I saved a woman's life. I married her. What position is that? The position of a man who chose scandal over sense. Porter's voice was almost sympathetic. I'm sorry, Caleb. I truly am. But you brought this on yourself. Did I? Or did you and your friends decide to punish me for not dancing to your tune? We're trying to maintain standards. You're trying to maintain control. Caleb stepped closer. And you're using my land as leverage. Marry her properly, in the church, with the community present, and maybe we can revisit this. We are married properly. We have a legal certificate. A piece of paper from some traveling judge doesn't mean anything, not to this community. Porter's voice hardened. Do it right, or lose everything. Your choice. He walked away before Caleb could respond. Mara climbed down from the wagon and went to stand beside her husband. His whole body was rigid with rage. We could do it, she said quietly. Get married in the church. Give them what they want. I won't beg them for permission to live my life. It's not begging, it's surviving. He turned to look at her. You want to stand up in front of those people and pretend their approval matters? I want to keep our home. The word, our, seemed to break something in him. His shoulders sagged. I don't know if I can do that, he said. Stand there and let them judge us. Let them pretend they have the right. Then we'll lose the ranch. Maybe we will. Mara took his hand. Caleb, I didn't marry you to watch you throw everything away out of pride. It's not pride, it's... He stopped, searching for words. They're trying to break me. Break us. If we give in now, they'll never stop. And if we don't give in, we'll have nothing left to fight for. They stood there in the middle of the street, the town watching, both of them caught between impossible choices. Finally, Caleb exhaled. Let me think about it. They drove home in heavy silence. That night, Mara found Caleb in the barn, brushing down the horses with more force than necessary. I talked to Doc Harding, she said. He didn't stop brushing. About what? About the bank. About Porter. He says they're serious. If we don't settle the debt, they'll foreclose. I know. So what are we going to do? The brush paused mid-stroke. I don't know. Mara leaned against the stall door. We could sell some of the cattle. That might give us enough to... I already sold most of them. What's left isn't worth enough. Then we need another plan. I'm open to suggestions. She'd been thinking about this all day, turning it over in her mind. What if we did both? Got married in the church to satisfy them, but also found a way to pay down the debt ourselves, show them we don't need their charity. How? We don't have the money. Not yet, but we could earn it. She came closer, her mind racing. Your ranch is falling apart because you've been doing everything alone, but there's good land here, good water. We could grow vegetables, raise chickens for eggs, maybe get a few pigs, sell the surplus in town. That takes time. They want payment in 30 days. So we start small. We do what we can. And we negotiate with the bank for more time. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. We don't give up, Caleb. We fight. But we fight smart. He stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, resignation giving way to something harder, more determined. You really think we can do this? I know we can. We saved your life. We can save your ranch. A slow smile crossed his face. Our ranch. What? You said my ranch. It's ours now. For better or worse. The words sent warmth through her chest. Ours, she repeated. They worked through the night, making plans, calculating costs, figuring out what they could plant before winter, what animals they could afford, how much they'd need to earn to satisfy the bank. It was overwhelming, impossible maybe, but as the sun rose and they sat together at the kitchen table, surrounded by paper and numbers and half-formed ideas, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, hope. They announced their intention to remarry in the church the following Sunday. The news spread through town like wildfire. Some people seemed satisfied. This was what they'd wanted all along. Others remained skeptical. But the general consensus was that at least Caleb and Mara were trying to make things right. The ceremony was scheduled for the following Sunday, 1 week to prepare. Mrs. Chen offered to make Mara a dress, simple white cotton, nothing fancy, but clean and new. Sarah donated ribbon for trim. Even Doc Harding contributed, gruffly offering to walk Mara down the aisle since she had no family present. You don't have to do that, Mara said. I know, but someone should. And I figure I've got as much right as anyone, seeing as I'm the one who brought you to that ranch in the first place. You regret that? He looked at her sharply. Do I look like I regret it? No. Then stop asking stupid questions. The kindness nearly undid her. The week passed in a blur of preparation and work. Mara and Caleb threw themselves into the ranch, attacking every task with desperate energy. They repaired more fence, cleared more land, planted a late garden that might give them vegetables before the first frost. Caleb rode into town twice to negotiate with the bank manager, a thin, nervous man named Ashford, who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. I can give you 90 days, he said finally, but that's all. And you'll need to show progress, payments, something to demonstrate you're serious about settling this debt. We'll make the payments, Caleb said. See that you do. They had 90 days, 3 months to save the ranch. It wasn't enough time, but it was more than they'd had before. Sunday arrived with clear skies and warm weather. Mara dressed in the little room off the kitchen, her hands shaking as she buttoned the white dress. It fit well. Mrs. Chen had good eyes for measurements. The ribbon at the waist was pale blue, a touch of color that made the whole thing feel less stark. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Her face was thinner than it had been when she'd arrived in Arizona, tanned from weeks in the sun. Her hands were rough, calloused. She barely recognized herself. But maybe that was the point. She wasn't the same woman who'd stepped off that train. That woman had been running from something. This woman was running toward something. There was a soft knock at the door. You ready? Caleb's voice. Almost. She opened the door. Caleb stood there in a clean shirt and pants, his hair combed back, his beard trimmed. He looked nervous. You look beautiful, he said. You don't have to say that. I know, I wanted to. He offered his arm. Ready to face the wolves? As ready as I'll ever be. They rode into town together in the wagon, both of them silent. The church loomed ahead, a white building with a tall steeple, larger than Mara had expected. People were already gathering outside, dressed in their Sunday best. When Caleb helped Mara down from the wagon, she felt every eye on her. Mrs. Porter stood near the entrance, her face carefully neutral. Thompson was there too, along with most of the men who'd ridden out to the ranch. Porter himself nodded at Caleb, a gesture that might have been approval or might have been something else entirely. Doc Harding met them at the door, offering his arm to Mara. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. For them or for you? She thought about that. For us. For me and Caleb. He nodded, satisfied. Then let's get this over with. The church was packed, every pew filled, people standing along the walls. Mara had expected hostility, whispers, cold stares. What she got was silence. Not comfortable, not welcoming, but waiting. Like the whole town was holding its breath to see what would happen next. She walked down the aisle on Doc Harding's arm, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. Caleb stood at the front, waiting. When their eyes met, he smiled, small and private, meant just for her. She reached the front. Doc Harding placed her hand in Caleb's and stepped back. The minister, a stern-faced man in his 50s, opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved," he began. The words washed over Mara in a wave. She tried to focus, tried to listen, but all she could think about was the weight of the room's attention, the judgment, the expectation. Then Caleb squeezed her hand and she looked at him. He was watching her, not the minister, not the crowd, just her. And suddenly the rest of it didn't matter. The minister asked them to repeat their vows. They did, their voices steady. "Do you, Caleb Ward, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Mara Collins, take this man?" "I do." The ring again. The same one from the first ceremony slipped onto her finger for the second time. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Caleb kissed her, and this time it wasn't quick or nervous. It was deliberate, a statement. When they turned to face the congregation, Mara expected something, applause maybe, or continued silence. What she got was Porter standing up. The whole church went still. Porter walked to the center aisle, and for a terrible moment Mara thought he was going to object, going to say something that would undo everything. Instead, he stopped and looked directly at Caleb. "I was wrong," he said. The words echoed in the silent church. "I was wrong," Porter repeated, "about a lot of things. I thought I was protecting this community, protecting our standards. But what I was really doing was punishing a good man for not fitting into the box I wanted him in." Caleb stared at him, clearly shocked. Porter turned to address the whole congregation. "Most of you know I went to the Ward Ranch a few weeks back. I saw what Miss Collins, Mrs. Ward, had done there. The work, the care. I saw a woman who could have left, who could have taken the easy road but chose to stay and fight." He paused, his voice roughening. "My wife reminded me of something last night. She said we claim to value hard work, resilience, doing what's right even when it's hard. But when someone actually demonstrates those things, we punish them for not doing it the way we think they should." Mrs. Porter, sitting in the front pew, nodded. "Caleb Ward nearly died on that ranch," Porter continued, "alone, because none of us bothered to check on him. This woman saved his life, and our response was to threaten him, to call in his debts, to try to force them into submission." He shook his head. "That's not who we should be." The church was so quiet, Mara could hear the wind outside. "I spoke to the bank this morning," Porter said. "Ashford has agreed to extend the loan for a full year with reasonable payment terms. No one should lose their home because they fell in love." As Caleb's hand tightened on Mara's. "I can't speak for everyone here," Porter finished, "but I can speak for myself. Caleb, Mara, I'm sorry. For the judgment, for the cruelty, for forgetting that grace is supposed to be the foundation we build on, not the exception we grant reluctantly." He sat down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then someone in the back started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined in. Not everyone. Some people sat stone-faced, clearly unconvinced, but enough to matter. Mara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back. The minister cleared his throat. "Well, that was unexpected, but perhaps timely." He smiled at Mara and Caleb. "You may kiss the bride." Again. Laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking the tension. Caleb pulled Mara close and kissed her thoroughly. Afterward, people filed out of the church. Some approached to offer congratulations. Awkward, stilted, but genuine. Sarah hugged Mara and whispered, "I told you it would work out." "You did not." "I should have." Mrs. Chen pressed a basket into Mara's hands. "For your wedding supper. You shouldn't have to cook tonight." "Thank you." Even Mrs. Porter approached, though she looked uncomfortable. "I hope you'll both be very happy," she said stiffly. "Thank you," Mara said, though the words felt strange in her mouth. Not everyone was warm. Thompson left without speaking to them. Several families hurried past with barely a nod. The wounds were too fresh, the judgment too ingrained. But it was a start. As the crowd thinned, Porter approached Caleb privately. "I meant what I said," he told him, "about the loan extension. You've got time now. Use it well." "I will." Caleb hesitated. "Why did you do it? Really?" Porter looked toward the church where his wife was talking with Doc Harding. "Because she asked me to. Because she said if I forced you to lose that ranch over something this stupid, she'd never forgive me." He smiled ruefully. "And because she was right. Sometimes we get so caught up in being right that we forget to be decent." He walked away, leaving Caleb staring after him. Mara came to stand beside her husband. "What did he say?" "That we have a year." "A year," she repeated. "That's a lot of time, if we use it right." She leaned against him, exhausted and relieved and overwhelmed all at once. "We will." They drove home in the late afternoon light, the wagon loaded with gifts people had pressed on them. Food mostly, along with some tools Caleb needed and a set of dish towels Mrs. Chen had embroidered. When the ranch came into view, Mara felt something settle in her chest. Relief, recognition, home. They unloaded the wagon together, working in comfortable silence. Then they sat on the porch and ate the wedding supper Mrs. Chen had packed: cold chicken, fresh bread, preserves, and a small cake that was almost too pretty to eat. "You okay?" Caleb asked. Mara thought about the question, about everything that had led to this moment: the train platform, the rejection, the fever, the fight. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think I am." He took her hand, running his thumb across her knuckles. "I know this wasn't the life you planned." "No, but maybe it's better." "Better than what?" "Than the one I would have had if Thomas Hendricks had been a better man." She looked at Caleb. "If he'd kept his promise, I'd be someone's wife right now. Someone who wanted me because I fit a certain idea in his head. But you want me because of who I actually am. I want you because you're stubborn and strong, and you don't let anyone tell you what you're worth." He smiled. "And because you saved my life." "You saved mine, too. You just don't know it." They sat there as the sun set, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The chickens settled into their coop. The world kept turning. And for the first time since stepping off that train, Mara Collins Ward felt like she'd finally stopped running. She was home. The work began in earnest the next morning. Mara woke before dawn to find Caleb already up, standing at the window with a cup of coffee. The light was just starting to turn the eastern sky gray. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He turned and she saw the determination in his face. "Too much to do. I kept thinking about everything we need to accomplish in the next year." "And?" "And it's going to take both of us working ourselves half to death." She got out of bed, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. "Then we'd better get started." They made a list over breakfast, a real list, written down, with dates and costs and what they'd need to make it all work. The garden had to be expanded significantly if they wanted to sell produce. They needed more chickens, better laying hens that would give them eggs year-round. The barn needed serious repairs before winter, and they had to bring in at least some cattle, enough to sell when prices were good. "We're going to need help," Caleb said, studying the numbers. "I can't do all the heavy work yet, not with my leg still healing. We'll hire someone. Day labor." "With what money?" Mara thought about the few dollars she had left, the money she'd saved from working for Doc Harding. It wasn't much. "We'll figure it out. We always do." She went into town that afternoon to talk to Doc Harding. He was in his office, grinding something in a mortar, and looked up when she entered. "Mrs. Ward," he said, and she heard the slight emphasis on the title, not mocking, just acknowledging. "I need my job back. If you'll have me." He set down the pestle. "Thought you were running a ranch now." "I am, but we need money, and I'm good at this work. I can do both." "You planning to kill yourself? Because that's what it sounds like." "I'm planning to save my home." Doc studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. 2 days a week. That's all I can offer." $1.50 each day. That's fine, thank you. Don't thank me. You'll earn every penny. She did. The work was backbreaking, scrubbing floors, boiling instruments, helping with patients, all while her body ached from the ranch work. On the days she went into town, she left before sunrise and didn't get back until after dark. Caleb would have dinner waiting, something simple he'd managed to cook despite his limitations in the kitchen. "You don't have to do this," he said one night, watching her nearly fall asleep over her plate. "Yes, I do. I can find another way to—" "Caleb." She reached across the table and took his hand. "We're in this together. That's what it means. I work, you work. We both do what needs doing." He looked down at their joined hands. "I'm not used to this." "Used to what?" "Having someone who stays. Who fights." His voice was rough. "Emma, she was good and kind, but she wasn't strong like you. When things got hard, she just gave up, got sick and died and left me to figure everything out alone." "That's not fair. She didn't choose to die." "I know, but you choose to stay. Every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He looked up and his eyes were bright. "I don't know what I did to deserve that." "You let me matter," Mara said simply. "That's enough." The weeks blurred together. Mara worked at Doc Harding's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the rest of the time she threw herself into the ranch. They hired a young man named Ben, barely 18, strong as an ox, willing to work for cheap because his own family farm had failed, to help with the heavy labor. Together, he and Caleb repaired the barn, reinforced the fences, cleared more land for planting. Mara focused on the garden and the chickens. She bought 6 new laying hens from a farmer outside town and built them proper nesting boxes. Within 2 weeks, they were producing eggs faster than she and Caleb could eat them. "We can sell these," she said one morning, gathering the eggs into a basket. Mrs. Chen mentioned she's always looking for fresh eggs for her boarding house, and Sarah said the hotel might buy them too. They started small. 1 dozen eggs here, 2 dozen there. But word spread. By the end of the first month, Mara had 3 steady customers and was making an extra $2 a week just from eggs. It wasn't much, but it was something. The garden came in better than expected. The late planting meant they missed some crops, but the beans and squash thrived in the Arizona heat. Mara picked them carefully, sorted them, packed them in crates Caleb built from scrap wood. "These look good," Sarah said when Mara brought the first batch to the general store. "People will buy these." "You think so?" "I know so. Nobody grows vegetables like this around here. Most people are too busy with cattle or too tired to bother." She examined a particularly large squash. "How much do you want for them?" They negotiated a fair price. Sarah would buy what she could sell, and Mara would bring fresh produce twice a week. The money started to trickle in. Slowly. Never quite enough, but steady. Caleb sold 2 steers he'd been fattening, got a decent price, and paid down part of the debt. He came home that day looking lighter, like a weight had lifted. "We made a payment," he told Mara. Ashford seemed surprised. "Good. Let him be surprised." He said if we keep this up, we'll be clear in 2 years. 2 years is better than never. They celebrated that night with a bottle of whiskey Caleb had been saving. They sat on the porch, passing it back and forth, watching the stars come out. "You know what I realized today?" Caleb said, his words slightly slurred. "We're going to make it. Don't jinx it. I'm serious. 3 months ago, I was ready to die. Now I'm sitting here with my wife, making plans for 2 years from now. He shook his head. "That's everything." Mara leaned against his shoulder. The whiskey had made her warm and loose-limbed. "You want to know something?" "What?" "I'm happy, really happy, for the first time in, I don't even know how long." He kissed the top of her head. "Me too." But happiness, Mara was learning, didn't mean easy. Winter came hard that year. The first snow fell in November, earlier than usual, and with it came a cold that seeped into every crack and corner of the house. They huddled near the stove, wrapped in blankets, and tried to keep the animals alive. 3 chickens died. One of the cows got sick and had to be put down. The garden froze solid, and they lost half the winter vegetables Mara had been counting on. "We're going to be short," Caleb said one night, going over the numbers. Even with your work at docks and the eggs and everything else, we're not going to have enough for the next payment. Mara's stomach clenched. How short? $30. Maybe 40. It might as well have been 1,000. They sat in silence, the numbers on the page mocking them. We could ask for an extension, Mara said finally. We already got one. Ashford's not going to give us another. Then we sell something. The wagon, some tools. We need those to work. Then what do we do? Caleb rubbed his face, exhausted. I don't know. The answer came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen showed up at the ranch 3 days before the payment was due, riding in a buggy with another woman Mara didn't recognize. Mrs. Ward, Mrs. Chen said, climbing down. This is my sister, Helen. She runs a restaurant in Phoenix. Helen was older than Mrs. Chen, round-faced and practical-looking. She shook Mara's hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. I hear you grow good vegetables, Helen said. I try. My sister says they're the best she's seen. Clean, fresh, good size. Helen looked around the property, assessing. I need a steady supplier. Someone I can count on for produce year-round. Greens in winter, tomatoes in summer, everything in between. Mara's heart started to beat faster. That's a big order. Can you do it? I'd need to expand the garden, build a cold frame for winter crops. It would take work. And money, Caleb said, appearing from the barn. Helen nodded. I'll give you an advance, $50. You use it to expand your operation, and in return, I get first pick of everything you grow for the next year. Fair price for quality goods. Mara and Caleb exchanged a look. That's very generous, Caleb said slowly. But why? Because my sister says you're good people who work hard and deserve a chance. Helen shrugged. And because I'm tired of buying wilted vegetables from Phoenix suppliers who charge too much and deliver too little. This is business. Good business. We'll take it, Mara said before Caleb could overthink it. Helen pulled out a leather purse and counted out $50 in cash. Mara stared at it. Don't make me regret this, Helen said. You won't. After they left, Mara and Caleb stood in the yard, the money in Mara's hands. That just happened, Caleb said. That just happened. They made the payment with room to spare. Ashford looked surprised again, and Mara took a vicious satisfaction in proving him wrong. With the remaining money, they bought lumber for a cold frame, more seeds, and another milk cow that was young and healthy and would give them years of production. The ranch started to transform. Slowly, piece by piece, but undeniably. By spring, the garden was twice its original size. Mara had built 4 cold frames and was growing lettuce, spinach, and radishes even in the coldest months. The eggs were selling faster than the chickens could produce them. And Caleb had brought in 6 new steers that would be ready to sell by fall. They were tired all the time. Their hands were perpetually dirty. They fell into bed exhausted every night and woke before dawn every morning. But they were making it. People in town started to notice. The whispers changed. Instead of scandal, they talked about hard work, about resilience, about the couple who defied expectations and built something real. Porter stopped by one afternoon in early summer, ostensibly to check on some cattle he'd heard Caleb had for sale. Ranch looks good, he said, surveying the property. Really good. Thank you. I won't lie. I didn't think you could pull this off. Thought the bank would have this place by now. Caleb smiled. So did a lot of people. You proved us wrong. Porter hesitated, then offered his hand. I respect that. They shook. After Porter left, Mara came out of the garden, dirt on her apron and sweat on her forehead. What did he want? To buy 2 steers, and to eat crow, I think. She laughed. Good, he should. That night, they sat on the porch like they always did, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. You ever think about what would have happened if things had gone different? Caleb asked. Different how? If Thomas Hendricks hadn't been a coward, if he'd kept his word and married you. Mara thought about it, about the life she might have had with a man who'd wanted someone else, someone smaller, someone who fit his idea of what a wife should be. I think I would have been miserable, she said honestly, trying to be something I'm not, trying to make myself smaller so he'd be comfortable. You're never small, even when you try to be. She looked at him. Is that a compliment? It's the truth. He took her hand. You fill up space, Mara. You take up room in the world and you don't apologize for it. That's what I love about you. The words hung in the air. He'd said them so casually, like they weren't the most important thing he'd ever said. You love me? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He turned to face her fully. Of course I do. How could I not? You saved my life, fought for our home, worked yourself to exhaustion every day without complaint. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Tears pricked her eyes. I love you too. I've been too scared to say it, but I do. Scared of what? That you'd change your mind. That one day you'd look at me the way Thomas Hendricks did and realize you made a mistake. Caleb pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. I'm not him. I never will be. When I look at you, I see the woman who refused to let me die. The woman who won't let anything beat her. That's who you are. That's who I married. She buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry, not from sadness, but from relief. From the overwhelming knowledge that she was seen, truly seen, and loved anyway. They sat like that until the stars came out, holding each other, building their future one moment at a time. The year passed, then another. The ranch prospered. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. They paid down the debt month by month, expanded the garden, bought more cattle, built a better barn and a chicken coop that didn't leak. Mara kept working for Doc Harding 1 day a week, not because they needed the money anymore, but because she liked the work, liked feeling useful in town, liked the reminder that she was more than just a rancher's wife. Sarah got married to a carpenter from Phoenix and moved away, but not before throwing Mara a going-away party that half the town attended. Mrs. Chen's boarding house expanded, and she hired 2 girls to help run it. Even Mrs. Porter thawed eventually, grudgingly admitting that perhaps she'd been too hasty in her judgments. You've done well for yourselves, she told Mara one day at the general store. I'll give you that. Thank you. Though I still think you could have done things more properly from the start. Mara smiled. Properly never worked for me. I had to do it my way. Mrs. Porter actually laughed. I suppose you did. On a morning 2 years after that first payment, Caleb rode into town and came back with a piece of paper that he waved triumphantly as he galloped up to the house. We're clear, he shouted. The debt's paid. The ranch is ours free and clear. Mara ran out to meet him, and he swept her up, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. We did it, she said, breathless. You did it. You saved this place, saved me. We saved each other. They celebrated that night with the whole town. Porter brought whiskey. Mrs. Chen made a cake that was too sweet and too perfect. Doc Harding complained about the noise but stayed anyway. Even people who'd once judged them showed up to congratulate them on their success. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. Some wounds were too deep for that. But it was acceptance. Recognition that Mara and Caleb had earned their place in the community through work and determination and refusing to give up. Late in the evening, Mara found herself on the porch, taking a break from the noise and celebration inside. She looked out over the land, the fields she'd planted, the fences she'd mended, the barn she'd helped rebuild. Caleb came out and stood beside her. You okay? I was just thinking about the day I arrived, how lost I felt, how certain I was that I'd made the worst mistake of my life. And now? Now I know it was the best thing that ever happened to me. She turned to face him. I came here looking for someone else's dream. Instead, I found my own. He kissed her, soft and sweet, and somewhere in the house someone started playing a fiddle. Dance with me, Caleb said. Out here? Why not? He pulled her close, and they moved together in the moonlight, swaying to music that drifted through the open windows. Mara rested her head on his shoulder and felt the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. She thought about Thomas Hendricks sometimes, wondered where he was, if he ever thought about the woman he'd rejected, if he ever realized what he'd lost. Probably not. But it didn't matter anymore. He'd looked at her and seen a problem. Caleb looked at her and saw a partner, saw strength where others saw weakness, saw beauty where others saw flaws. That was the difference between someone who wanted an idea and someone who wanted a person. The music changed to something faster, and people started spilling out onto the porch to dance. Sarah's husband pulled her into a reel. Mrs. Chen surprised everyone by dancing with Doc Harding, who protested loudly but didn't pull away. Even the porters joined in, looking almost young again. Mara and Caleb danced until their feet hurt and their sides ached from laughing. Then they danced some more. When the party finally wound down and everyone had gone home or found somewhere to sleep, Mara and Caleb climbed up to the ridge above the ranch, the same ridge where Caleb had once come to think about giving up. They sat together on a flat rock, looking down at their home. The house with its mended roof, the barn with its new doors, the fields that would feed them and others for years to come. "You changed everything," Caleb said quietly. "You know that, right? Everything I thought my life would be, small and lonely and ending badly. You changed all of it. You changed me too. Made me see that I was worth fighting for, worth staying for." He put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him. "What do you think happens next?" she asked. "I don't know. More work, probably, more struggles. Nothing's ever easy." "No, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it is." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun start to rise over the desert. The sky turned from black to deep blue to purple, then pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. Mara thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The girl in Philadelphia who'd dreamed of adventure. The woman on the train platform who'd felt like her life was ending. The stranger in a strange land who'd had to figure out how to survive. And now this, a woman who'd built a home with her own hands, who'd fought for her place in the world and won, who'd learned that worth wasn't something other people gave you, but something you claimed for yourself. She'd crossed a continent for a promise that turned to ash. But from those ashes, she'd built something real, something lasting. "I'm glad I came here," she said. Caleb smiled. "So am I." They watched the sunrise together, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, who'd refused to let the world's judgment define them, who'd chosen each other again and again despite everything. The desert was waking up around them. Birds singing, cattle lowing in the distance, the wind moving through the grass like breath. And Mara Collins Ward, who'd once been invisible, who'd once been rejected for simply existing, sat on that ridge with her husband and felt more seen than she'd ever felt in her life. Not despite who she was, but because of it. She'd stopped trying to be smaller, stopped trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. Instead, she'd created her own space, built her own life, made her own rules. And in doing so, she'd found exactly what she'd been searching for all along. Not someone else's acceptance, her own. The sun broke over the horizon, flooding the world with light, and Mara smiled. She was home,